Okay. Hey, folks. Welcome back. It's good to have you here. I am very much looking forward to introducing you to our guest, who is Christine Marie Mason. Welcome, Christine. Good to have
Thank
you.
you. Good to see you.
Christine is quickly becoming one of my favorite new friends. We met in Asheville a few months ago at the Holo Movement gathering, and I purchased a couple copies of your new book about the stages of women, the development of the feminine journey. I want to ask you questions about that today. And we're just landing in this call talking about the state of the world, phone calls you and I are both coming off of where businesses and organizations are navigating the climate and the environment that we're operating in, the political and social and economic climates that we're operating in. So we might explore some of this as well. Before we get going, I'm just going to take a moment, as I always do at the beginning of this podcast. As anyone who's been here before knows, this is a field first podcast. And what that means is, as a listener, taking a breath here, as a listener,
Ah, yeah. Yeah.
we invite you to notice not just the words that we are speaking, but also where we are in relationship from. We invite you to relax into and allow yourself to be resourced and even recreated by the field of consciousness that this podcast is recorded from. So we welcome you, our listeners, here with us in the moment, and just inviting you to take a deep breath and arrive. So,
Okay.
how are you arriving, Christine?
I'm arriving with having driven all night, returning from a medicine ceremony and getting home late, and then coming into these beautiful redwoods where I live and being connected to the trees first thing in the morning, sitting out in the hot water in the backyard and feeling the vibration of the trees. Then connecting with a board that I'm on, the Mission Within Foundation, which provides psychedelic mental health treatment to veterans and first responders who've suffered significant trauma, and very conscious of the fact that there are 12 million people in need of these services, at least in the US, and only about 10,000 beds annually. And sort of a sense that we could do so much more to reserve suffering, to resolve suffering than we're able to do given the structures that are in place. And I notice in myself that gap produces a little energetic frisson, like a little bit of a dissonance and like an urgency that is part of my general habit, urgency versus allowing. So I'm kind of noticing that, and also a curiosity and a joy to be with you.
Oh, well, thank you for being here, and I can feel your love for human beings in what you're sharing. And I can really meet you in, for me, what can be quite maddening, this feeling of how much more we can be doing to support ourselves and each other in the world that we're living in, and not, and feeling like the moment isn't meeting us, perhaps, in what we're available for in terms of how to connect.
Mm.
So I'm
And
curious.
you? How are you arriving?
I'm just coming off the phone with one of my closest friends. His startup has basically completely run out of money. He's investing his own money into his company, and it's focused on civilizational well-being. His company is focused on creating a new social media platform for civilizational well-being. And um, I felt throughout the whole call, I felt this underlying angst and almost like a muted panic attack, an anxiety sort of thing, which, this might just be a mirror of what's going on in me, but it seems like I'm just surrounded by people these days who are having panic attacks underneath the presentation of like everything's fine. And whether it's a consciousness presentation that's like, we're all just one being unfolding perfectly in the moment. No, 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 no. Or it's more of a corporate board presentation of like, we're experiencing some challenges right now, but by Q3, our reports will be back on schedule. Like whatever the presentation is, it feels to me like a mask on top of this nervous system transmission that's like, help. So
I love that you're naming this. I feel there's a deeper knowing that's happening inside of everyone. We know we're in the middle of rapid and more rapid change than I've ever experienced in my lifetime, more unpredictability, and that we know we have to change the way we live and the way we relate, and yet the systems and our habits haven't really caught up with it. And so I think the what you're naming as a nervous system dysregulation is the gap between our overt knowing and our inner knowing.
Mm.
And that in closing, in bringing that into our awareness, we're sort of meeting the fact that so much has to shift, and that makes for a very big to-do list.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And it's tricky because I've really been with this thing lately of, people say like everything's perfect. People in consciousness work will say everything's perfect. We can be with things as it is. And I'm holding up my hand and going, wait a minute. Do we still say that when someone's in a freeze response? Like, of course we do. Like everything's perfect and everything's fine. And uh, we need there needs to be permission to say it's not fine and to feel it's not fine as part of that larger everything is fine and to really have that experience. And that's the um, I love your tagline on your website of wake down into the body, wake up into the one. For me, that feels like the game that we're talking about here is like you can't bypass what's happening in the body to be in everything's perfect. If things in us are feeling like everything's not perfect.
Yeah, I feel like the perfection conversation sort of gets tied to perfect as in the good, like it's beautiful, it's elegant, there's a quality of positivity to perfect, versus the idea of perfect as a fit to the circumstance. And that someone, here's a couple of examples of that. Like if everything is happening for my soul's evolution and I've refused to look over and over at a shadow place in myself, and so circumstances that I would deem unpleasant keep arising, those are perfect for me to, like, they keep driving me to resolve this contortion in the soul. So they're perfect in that sense. Another example would be everyone has a perfect body, perfectly adapted to what genes, habits, and circumstances have demanded of it, that perfectly acclimated to that. So I feel like the redefinition of perfect to fit is one topic. And then the other one is the freeze response, that overwhelm response, um, is an adaptation, is a perfect adaptation when you can't take it, but that doesn't mean you stay with the adaptation. The next move is the perfect next move, which is to like to open the aperture slightly into noticing what's in the room, feel it in your body, know that the narrative that's in your head that's freezing you isn't the only thing going on, so that you can scan a bit more and find the next step. So the perfect as a spiritual bypass is different than the perfect as right in the next steps of the world. Does that?
It makes perfect sense. I'm with you, and I notice I'm slowing down a gear, and it resonates with these last days. I have walked a numerous number of people through sensorial experiences of can you touch the fabric on your couch and just notice how that feels?
Mhm,
Fingertips, like what do you taste right now?
mhm.
Allow the sound of the cars to like come into your hearing and just watching people come out of that buzzing freeze response, and go, oh my goodness. And when it happens because saliva re-enters the mouth, right? And typically people have a big yawn. There's really nice signs of when someone goes from a sympathetic nervous system tone to parasympathetic again. And um,
I'm noticing even as you name it, I'm doing that. Like I feel the texture of the rug under my feet. I feel the softness of my pants, the light sort of hitting sideways on the eye. And that does draw me completely back into my heart, back from the realms of the mind, back down into the heart. And from here, there's much more choice available. Beautiful. Thank you.
thank you. I'm doing the same. I'm rubbing my hands along the tabletop here.
We're having a tantric experience through the Zoom.
Yeah, settling in. Speaking of tantric experiences, you lead mostly women through tantric experiential body upgrade, technology of the body, evolutionary journeys. Yes?
It's I lead co-ed groups through classical tantra philosophy, and I do have some women's groups that are more tightly focused, particularly around Rosebud. And we do a little bit with sacred sexuality, but it's nested in this longer arc story. I was really lucky that when I first found yoga, I didn't find gym yoga. I found the ancient lineage of Kashmir Shaivist Tantra, which is one of the original non-dual approaches to thinking, like to thinking about how the cosmos is constructed. And it's also one of the few lineages that don't bypass the body. They bring and include the body. So many of us who grew up in a Western religious tradition were taught that the body was sinful or bad or the senses were bad, and you're basically trying to get out of here, get out of this world for the next world. Whereas this philosophy says that everything is holy, including your body, including your sexuality, that even things that the culture deems taboo are included in the divine. And once you sort of drop into that worldview, that you, Forrest, are a fragment of the one light, and that your sensorial experience, the way that you directly interpret the world around you, is the only way that the Godhead knows itself. And so your whole job in a body is to be fully present, having cleared the lens of your own perception, so that you can be meeting the world as it is actually showing up for you, really touching it, tasting it, feeling it, breathing it, being present with others in deep kinship, being present with nature in deep kinship. And that's the fullness of being in a body. No one ever will experience the world in the same way as you. So just be in your experience. That is such a liberating idea versus like trying to get to somewhere better or make yourself better or improve yourself. And the whole job is to clear that lens. And then how the sexual tantra component became so prevalent in the West was because in the West, in India, they were already eating meat and drinking wine and uh, you know, those things were taboo. And so those things were included in tantric practices as sort of a, see, this is holy. But in the West, those were things that were already happening. So, but the sex piece was repressed, so it got a lot of extra attention. And then the next piece of that work is to dive into the practices like mudra, mantra, breath work that can help you refine your perception and attunement so that you feel yourself, which then prepares you to be in relationship with the rest of the world. So I teach those practices, and we do it in a community environment, like a longitudinal community of practice that makes it really fun.
I have to say, I've seen your photos of you and your community on Instagram, and you look like you're having a lot of fun.
Well, I love them. I mean, I love the other thing is okay, grr, I don't even know where to start. I grew up like many of it, like the teacher is like a dominance hierarchy model, like the teacher at the front of the room. The whole emergence of this like circular church, the circular model of teaching, where you invite everybody into the space with that perspective that you as a participant are already a fragment of the Godhead. You also have your innate knowing and wisdom, and that we're in a mutuality. I might create the container, provide the content for this program, but that you're coming with your unique perspective and you will change the container. And inviting that creates a very different sense of how we work together. And the friendships and the freedom that deepen from that are really remarkable. I actually see that as like the future of work, the future of church, and education, much more mutuality.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a feminine principle of leadership that I come in contact with as you're saying this. I get this feeling of the bottom up emergence as opposed to top down. Like,
Yeah, I feel lateral, more lateral. I would love to speak to this. Another piece in both the Shaivas Tantra and in the general work of my life is the idea that of the feminine principle versus the masculine principle is held a little differently. Like that there's a concept in the Indian philosophy of the Ardhanishwara, that the spirit is half and half, the half and half God. And it's often depicted like a Shiva with a line down the center, and on the one side it's masculine, on the other side it's feminine. And the idea is that you are half your mother and half your father, and you are half all your sons and daughters in the future already embedded in your embodiment. And that rather than seeing it as a genitalized physical body, that you are carrying the principles of agency and receptivity, the masculine and the feminine in your heart. And then in every being, you're aiming for a balance of that. Like I can be in action when I need to be linear, move forward, create the boundaries in my life, create the structures in my life. And I can be soft and receptive and flowing and moving with circumstance and resilience. And if I'm lacking one or the other, like without the boundaries, I collapse and I'm like pooled and I don't have any potency. And without the water, I'm hard and brittle. And so the we lose the idea in my tradition of the masculine and feminine as sexual or gendered, and we return to it as its in its core principles. So that's what I'm hoping will emerge in the culture also, that we will see a culture that is more receptive than it has been, more attuned than it has been. Um, yeah, but doesn't deny the benefits of the masculine energetic. Long silence.
Yeah, I'm just taking in what you're sharing here. How's tell me about your journey as you've had this I want to say the word revitalization comes to me of the masculine and feminine. I mean, I imagine there's been a deep deconditioning process of what you were given by your culture or upbringing, and then a rekindling of the innateness that was already there. I'm curious, how long has this journey been happening, and what, like, is there a significant moment or a couple significant moments that you could bring light to that would,
I'll tell you, actually, it's a very interesting way to ask the question because I had a wonderful, creative German mother, and she was sort of a hippie. And my father was a code breaker for the military and an economist, and as about as ISTJ, if you know the Myers-Briggs types, as you can get. And they were really in a difficult situation where he couldn't understand the way she was like wild and musical and perceptive, and she was feeling like so contained, so restrained, and she left early and then she was murdered. And my father, and he raised us then from like I was 8, from 8 on he raised us. And so he told me under with no uh with no confusion at all that the masculine linear way of being was much preferred, and that if I would learn how to do practical things in the masculine world, I would be very well served in my life and respected. And he told me, I think at 14, never to rely on my looks. They fade. Never to rely on my smarts because there'll always be someone smarter than me. To only rely on my effort, showing up and getting things done. And I really internalized that. And at the same time, I was longing for feminine and family. And I met a young man when I was 16, married him at 18, and we had 3 kids by 22. And then I went to grad school. So I was like holding this paradox of like the desire to be like this soft, feminine, nurturing mother while getting an MBA and running a company. And like it was just such a I really leaned into the masculine with the outward gloss of the feminine. Like, but my inner architecture was very get it done. I got rewarded for being prolific and productive. And I think a lot of women hold that. They look soft and feminine on the outside, but the inner architecture is get it done. And then when I was in my early 30s, I hit the age where my mother was when she was killed, and my daughter was the age that I was. And I had sort of like a ripple across time space that it was time to come into balance. And that's when I began practicing yoga, tantra, singing, softening, exploring the feminine. And I rejected for a long while. I went from being like a triathlete to a big, soft, squishy mama bear, and went all the way to the other side. Didn't want to really do much of the things I was doing before. And then I think the bounce back sort of began to correct itself, where I could feel into through practices what was my own genuine balance and architecture, what's my unique signature. I did begin to look at the way the message around being a woman had been demonized and shamed in my religion, in my family of origin, whether that's slut shamed or like you're dirty because you have a period, or the lack of education around pregnancy and childbirth, or it's just so many things. The ways that I was spending my money to sanitize, clean, and polish the body, where the masculine in my life never had to do that. That time and money for them was freed up to build things and create things. But for me, I had all these other culturally assigned tasks. So I spent quite a bit of time excavating that. I started a business focused on bringing messages of no shame and acceptance to the vulva, the vaginal area, the reproductive organs, your sexuality as a center of power. And I spent like a good 8 years running that company. We're in our 8th year. And what I'm noticing is there's this beauty that happens when you go directly into the stuff that is shadowed for you. Like I have a great teacher who says, go into the shadow. That's where the rest of the light remains, where the rest of the light will be found. So if I, by going all the way into the sexual shame, to the embodiment shame of the feminine, what I found underneath there was this beautiful wealth of wisdom of female spirituality and goddess traditions and potency from the womb that I didn't expect. And once I saw that and could illuminate that, I was able to weave back to incorporating some of my more agentic masculine. And I see that journey for a lot of women.
Mhm.
Yeah. And similarly for the masculine, like men who heal, who come out of like a very rigid masculine model, and they go all the way into the feminine, like I'm supposed to feel my feelings and I'm supposed to be soft and I'm supposed to ride the wave of the dynamic feminine Shakti, and then they kind of get confused about what they are about in the world. And there's a little bit of like coming to terms with the shadow of the violent masculine, the controlling masculine, and they don't like it, and they go through this process of opening to the feminine and then come back around and restore themselves to some sort of integrated balance.
That's right.
Yeah.
It seems, I mean, from meeting you and knowing you and from what I've read about you online, it seems like you have really done this in a tremendous way. I mean, you correct me here if I'm getting my things inaccurately, but it sounds like you're running 4 or 5 different companies. You have one of the biggest podcasts on in the world. You're on the board of several organizations, and you also are doing this women's work and seemingly staying in a very soft, feminine, receptive place. So it seems to me like you've very much mastered or gotten very close to mastery of the dynamic relationship between masculine and feminine.
I appreciate you saying that. Let me speak to that. So one of the masks of capitalism is that I do it. I do it. But the reality is Rosebud has 3 amazing executives and a packing team and a production house, and those people do it.
Mhm.
And Radiant Farms has growers all over the world and an amazing man who makes medicine, and those people do it. Sundari has 11 staff members, and those people do it. And so I have my an architectural hand in things, but I no longer think that like the bio presents in a way that the hagiography of the special individual would that has been the capitalist tendency would invite. So I've tried to look for words like I'm a steward or I'm a contributor or I'm an inspirer on these things. Those don't translate well into LinkedIn. Um, but I do have my hand in things. They're all integrated with this idea of waking down into the body and waking up to the one. They all fit into that overarching mission of deeply embodied spirituality. As Patrick would put it, my teacher, no split between the material and the spiritual.
Wait, the last two shares you've had, I want to take it one step further, which is if these wisdoms that you're discovering in the shadow um, of the feminine awakening journey and what you're sharing here, which is so beautiful about, it takes a village, not just the one kind of Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg at the top of the pyramid. We get sold this story. Um, I want to understand what you see as the consequences. I mean this in a generous way, the consequences of the ripples of what you're discovering permeating out into the world and culture and society. What's
Well, the first word that hit me was responsibility. Like it goes from having a projected responsibility onto a big daddy CEO, that they're the ones who are doing it, or a big anonymous corporation. The distributed realization that if I named the entire executive team at Facebook or at Meta, rather, and all the people who were involved in the manipulation of the algorithm to serve outrage, then all of a sudden the diffused responsibility of that makes it less, it repersonalizes it and makes it less monolithic and something that if we change our hearts and minds at the individual level and have dialogues with our friends who are working in these organizations, then things actually can change. I think removing the story of the lone individual who has wizard powers makes us all more empowered to do the shifts that culture needs to be more balanced. That's one thing. Um, I don't know. Yeah, it reminds you of your not just your responsibility, but of your light and potency. Uh, yeah, and it will probably also shift the balance of reward. Like if you really were to see that it's these 8,000 people who are making this organization fly, and then not believe that it wouldn't happen without the leadership of this magical, mystical executive, then perhaps you would invite a more balanced distribution of resources. There are other things like that that I think would ripple out. It's a good question. It's a good question. I mean, if I receive a person from an open place, it's very hard to hurt them, to judge them, to find fault with them, or to hurt them. If I'm really, and so I do think it would also lead to a much less violent world. Ooh, there's one other piece. Um, you create such an open field with a quiet in between that I'm noticing more comes. Okay, here's a little story. So we have this place in Hawaii where people live full time. There's maybe 20 beds, 20 rooms. And periodically, the community will get fed up with somebody and they'll be like, they've got to go. you know, and I was thinking about like, okay, or you can't come to the dance every week, or you can't come to the spa because you give creepy vibes. There's sort of like this. And then I sat down one day and I said, like, I do not even know how many people the current residents have over time disallowed or disinvited from the party, so to speak. And that what that does, to make people wrong and exclude and send them away, what that does over the long arc of a culture is to make everybody else fake it, to try to behave in a certain way that they won't get kicked out. It doesn't create any relaxation where you can actually be your full self, say what's on your mind, really look into your shadows, share it with others, be held in sort of a rupture and repair process, an accountability process that allows us all to grow. And so to create a society that has more receptivity would allow us to work with each other and create frameworks where everyone's included and we repair together and no one gets kicked out. Like island style living, like you're going to live with these people on an island and there's nowhere to go for the rest of your life. That like you have to sort of begin to create a container that tolerates the broken places or the unhealed places in people and works with it, doesn't exclude or push away from that. And I think some of these discoveries are really pointing in that direction.
Mhm.
We're back to the opening, like what is perfection?
Mhm. I love this. I love this idea of Earth as an island. I've never had that idea, but it's beautiful.
Well, I grew up, my grandfather was born on an island, a 5 by 7 mile island in the middle of Lake Michigan. He was like the third generation on that island. And that is exactly the culture. Like you are respectful, and if you hold your own process for the most part, and you only bring your process to the group when there's an intention to heal it. Like long-standing feuds don't blow up into things. They do get healed because there's nowhere to go. There's a ferry boat that leaves twice a day, but in general, there's nowhere to go. Yeah,
It gets me curious too because for me, I could share a long story about the healing process that's occurred in my inner man and woman and the insights I've
I'd
gotten.
love to hear that.
Yeah, well, the short of it is that when I see the consequences of it ripple out into the world, I see that number one, based on my own healing journey, what I feel like we need to do is take a moment to acknowledge and appreciate that although the system that we uh, have been operating in, this late stage capital system, is not going to make the trip, it's not going to work for us moving forward, it has gotten us to here. And I think there's room for an opening if we can have some appreciation for like there are roofs over our heads and air conditioning and a lot of things work kind of sort of pretty good. It's not perfect, but there's an opening that happens if we can say, hey, thank you, capitalism, for the world you've created. I'm not saying it's perfect, but having appreciation for the positives of it. And then creating the conditions for like the rigidity of the structures that exist to be resourced and recreated from the feminine. It's my personal experience was the woman in me took out a sponge and started to wipe down the man in me and heal him. And it was like this person who has been fighting to keep everyone he loves safe now gets to heal. And for me, that's what our world and our culture need. I mean, how do 8 billion people navigate coming to terms with the history that we have of how we've treated each other? That's a that's requires the feminine healing for us to be able to hold that kind of exploration.
Just work. The word that comes to mind is tender, like stay tender in a hard world. And wow, that visual is so strong. I did a process with a woman where she was having difficulty receiving and kind of stuck in the story of suffering. And one woman went behind her and held her. She leaned back into her arms and like let her heart open. Another woman fanned her, and another woman fed her frozen grapes as she like went really slow and just like calmed the whole system so that she could tap into more of what was around her and not be in that rigid fear that seemed to belong to her grandmother's, wasn't even like her fear. And knowing that every time that fear goes uh, examined, unrepaired, that it was passed from her grandmother to her mother to her and will go to her daughter and son. And that what you're speaking to, like I could rest and be sponged off. I could sponge my inner feminine, could sponge my inner masculine. I'll give a sponge bath. It's so beautiful. That imagine if all of the prior wounds of war had been sponged and expunged for the children and grandchildren, say, of the Holocaust or the war in Germany, and that wasn't carried forward into the architecture that built Israel, you know, that like, or we use a different example because that's such a controversial one at the moment. But in any situation where the wounds of past generations are set, the stage is set for them to be replicated. If those are cleared, we have the potential and to create a world of more harmonic existence, coexistence. If they're not cleared, they will not only replicate, they will amplify. So, since we know that you can only heal by softening into the places that are blocked, shameful, darkened, painful to look at, that's the only way. If you want to call that feminine and receptive, that's okay. You can also call it tenderizing, um, opening, brave. That's the only way, is to go in and through those. If the world stays rigid and people won't look, not only will we get more of what we've had, we'll get an intensification of what we've had. That's why I think the work of tenderizing is so important. But I do love what you're saying. Like, I love men and I love the masculine. And I like the part of me and other women that is masculine, that like builds stuff and creates stuff and imagines things and invents nanosteel and computers and AI. Like, that's amazing. I don't want to demonize that. I just want it to be informed by the somatic body, the emotional body, attunement, 7 generations of upcoming kinship. Can I have agency, genius, technology that's informed by the living body and the web of life? That would be the ideal.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and when you say speak, I'm losing my words here. When you say informed by the body, I feel it as our, these, I'm using air quotes, individual bodies of ours, the Christine body and Forrest body, and then also our collective body.
Mm. And the body of the earth. The body knows what it needs, and I'm often not listening. Somebody sent me Sarah Blondin's meditation list. She's on like Mindspace or one of those timer space mindset, whatever, one of those things. And it just is like, put your hand on your heart and I am here. I am listening. She just keeps saying it. And she's got this like seductive, amazing, calming voice. Like, her voice is at some frequency that calms your whole body. So I'm like, oh, wow, I'm here. I am listening. And then listen to what the body has to say. It's amazing. It tells you exactly what it needs. So, and so does my garden. So do the plants outside on the deck. Everything tells you what it needs. It shows it in its symptomology if you just listen.
And this is the new, it's not necessarily new, it's new and it's also ancient operating system and meaning making system where we come out of the head and come down into the body as you invite people and listen with our bodies, not just listen with our thoughts, but listen with every cell, listen with our nervous system, listen in our bones. And people can kind of look at me with a crooked head when I say this. And these are our deeper listening faculties where we can actually hear what's happening.
Yeah, you gave me a gift in the pre-call on this subject, which I would love to hear you repeat, about the difference between actively listening or looking for an answer and being receptive.
Mm.
Can you give that teaching again? That was so beautiful.
I was on your podcast yesterday, which I'll link in the show notes so people listen. But we were talking about um, the future, and I was sharing about how we can you've talked about active and receptive agency and receptivity, so we can actively dream, or actively imagine, or we could even brainstorm what the future might look like, which is kind of a going from where we are towards the future. But the other thing that we can do, you were sharing how you have a relationship with the frequency of the future. The future is a feeling tone. We know when the future is coming into us because we can feel it. And I was inviting the receptivity side of that, which is actually allowing the future to come into us or turning towards that vibrational frequency, feeling tone of the future and asking, will you show me the future? And from a place of deep receptivity, allowing the future to be revealed to us, to come into us.
That's right. That and I found that is such a beautiful idea. There's a Tom Waits quote where he says, he was driving down the Pacific Coast Highway and a song came to him. And he said to the song, he said, "Don't you see I am driving? Go give this song to someone else." And that it's sort of this model of ideation that ideas and thoughts are looking for receptive vehicles as much as you're looking for them. And that if you're good at catching them and turning them into manifest reality, that you'll get more, you know? And so what a difference then I am having an idea, that an idea is having me and it's landing in me. And then I would say, I think I mentioned to you that I've been doing this work on how we're wired for unity consciousness. We're wired to switch between that and the body. This is the fruits of attunement practice. If I clear out the noise in my environment, whether that's in meditation or doing less or creating space during the day, I will find the innate woo-woo capacities of my embodiment come back online almost instantly. I can see pictures in the limbic brain. I develop my psychic abilities, my intuition, my listening skills, my inner knowing, my way. There's a phrase Thomas Hubel uses, which is, I can feel myself feeling you, feeling me. And that's in our capacity, but we have gone into a perceptual freeze because of the level of information and activity that's coming into the dominant visual and auditory senses. And if you clear that and you clear the diet from having to do so much work, that all of a sudden so much more comes online and you can listen in a different way. So that's been a big curiosity. The ancients said you have uh, meditation, breath work techniques they prescribed, collective entrainment like dance, chant, um, drumming, those kinds of things. All these things that take you out of your little localized individual self back into the unity. Plant molecules can do that. And then, so like when it gets to be too much, God, nature, whatever creation has given you in your physical embodiment and through plant helpers ways to like leave the anxious self and go back and remind yourself that you are part of this oneness and then come back into the creative play in a body when it gets kind of like bland out there in Whitelandia, you know? So this is beautiful to me that you can have both the sense of deep peace that comes from knowing that connection and the sense of deep play that comes from everybody being different and all the cool, amazing things that there are to be created and seen in the world. Um, but maybe slowing the pace down
Yeah.
a little so that you can catch the idea.
I had a quote years ago that went kind of viral. I was on a podcast and I said that most bodies are like a browser with too many tabs open. You just have that like color wheel spinning. And yeah, exactly that. If anybody's watching the video and not just listening to audio, the face that Christine just made is a perfect, just spun out, just like in that just like the process has gotten so much that there's too much information. And Thomas Hubel is such a great teacher of this, of actually being able to make our nervous systems available so that over information can move through more than one computer, right? We can actually harmonize and cohere our nervous systems to process this information together. And I want to double click on this, Christine, because there's a protocol here, or there's phases here of, at first we are just overwhelmed, overinformed, overstimulated. It's just too much. And what we need to do is down regulate so that so that we can close tabs and be more available for the moment. And then as that happens, we start to be more available for what's happening, and all these other forms of information show up. You talked about images in the limbic brain, psychic abilities, downloads happen, all kinds of things open up. So I want to just stay here with you. I know this is a place that you're doing a lot of work. What are you learning in helping people navigate this journey of going from overwhelmed to like more fully online and booted up? I want to understand better.
Yeah, I mean, Thomas, I was with Thomas for 5 years,
Wow.
and his timeless wisdom training was a very potent container. It's a multi-year container. Um, I'll describe one of the practices that he gave. And I didn't realize how much social anxiety I had when I started his training. So, one of the first exercises was to sit with two other people in a triad, cross legged, knee to knee, make a little triangle, and then silently look at each other. Don't say anything, just actually like look at the other person, and then do a three sync where you feel your body, your emotions, and you notice your thoughts while you're looking at them. And you try to stay in a bi-location perception, stay with your feelings and noticing yourself while you're noticing the other person. Notice if you want to lean out toward the other person and shut down the perception of self, or if there's something about the looking at the other person that causes you to pull away, shut them out, and contract into your own being. And how difficult even the simple practice of looking at another person deeply and being looked at, how difficult it was, and how much the usual way we look is so shallow. We show our mask, they show their mask, it's a quick glance. But that the longer you sit, the more you notice energetically and physically also. But that the only way this becomes comfortable, this practice, is when you begin to do it with a spirit of no make wrong and no judgment. Like that is very uncomfortable if I believe you're finding fault with me, or you're going to see some part of me where my architecture is warped and undesirable. But if I'm doing it in the spirit of we're looking and noticing and being discerning, but our love for each other is unconditional, in that space, we can fully show ourselves, and that makes healing possible. So, the practice of how do I look with unconditional love and not make others wrong or the circumstances wrong is the first movement, like practicing noticing our own judgment and removing that and just allowing people to be as they are, to make the choices they are, and then getting comfortable looking and being looked at. And I feel like that's the beginning practice. Um, I also believe and teach ritual that it's very old fashioned to have altars in your home or to have a space at the beginning and the end of the day where you're lighting a candle and you're giving thanks for your life. But I find it indispensable. Like if you wake up in the morning and you light a candle and you say a prayer and you chant a chant, or you write in your journal, or you go touch the trees, or you go in a bath, like there's got to be something that you craft for yourself that isn't about self-improvement, but harmonization.
Hmm.
And where your prayer isn't a like a beseeching or a supplication. It's more like a acknowledgement of what is happening, a conversation like with an old friend. And so doing that also brings you into a space of more attunement. I believe in sadhana in practices like that you should sit and quiet a little bit every day, but for some people that makes them crazy anxious. So if you can't sit in quiet, walk in quiet, swim in quiet, do the dishes in quiet, like create something that is a meditation for you that allows you to be fully with yourself. With the whole practice is just noticing what's going on in yourself. how much is up, you know? So those are some places to begin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
This has really taken over in my life. I have a first thing in the morning and last thing before I go to sleep. There's just a time. It has its own rhythm now. It's not like I have to set a calendar invite or an alarm, but there's just some point when the day is done and there's this space between the day and sleep. And it's
Yeah.
just sitting on the couch with the lights off and being quiet. And same thing in the morning. There's a time between sleeping and life. There's just sort of this mosey moment um, to be between the waking world and the dream world. I saw your uh, response there to your notification. I'm just want to check in with you real quick.
I didn't see it. I just heard it. I was annoyed that I didn't have Do Not Disturb on. There it is. Good, it's on now. I thought I said that. Um, I love that you have that just sit in the dark on the couch. So here's a thing. For those of us or who are in partner relationships and living with other people, and I noticed that, I kind of jump back and forth between waking up alone and waking up with another person. And for a long time, if I was waking up with another person, I let go of my personal routines. Just
Mm,
do what they wanted. It's like, oh, you want to make love, you want to have a smoothie and get to work, you want to check your phone first thing, you want to do Wordle. you know, I just do it. I was because I wanted them to be comfortable and happy, and I didn't want to be a burden. So the shift to, hey, sweetheart, good morning. You're so beautiful. I'm gonna go do my practice. I'll see you in an hour, and like claiming that space, and then they sort of witness how it impacts you, and very often that person will be drawn into practice with you or into some expansion of cushion around their own waking and sleeping that creates more of a field that you can practice in together without forcing ever. Just stand in your own reality and what works for you and invite that as yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
yeah, here, amen. It's also so attractive to see in a partner. It's like, oh, you're gonna go do your thing right now. Like that's amazing.
Yay, that gives me permission to do my thing, whatever that
Totally.
happens to be.
Just like, thank goodness you have a sense of self and like take care of yourself and have agency and what's the word I'm looking for? Autonomy. You know what you
Yeah,
need, these types of things. So,
yeah. So I just wanted to say that. Family too. When the kids were little, they're in their 30s now. So when they were little, um, I would get up like 2 hours before them and do it. And then as they got older, I would overlap and we would have that space, that quiet morning space as family. And like, oh, they just like grab a book and come down on the couch. So it wasn't like starting out the day with the chaos of like, you gotta brush your teeth, you gotta get your breakfast, here's a lunchbox, get out the door. Like we created a cushion that we all shared in that space. And yeah, I think it's really served everybody well.
yeah. Yeah, it's such a gift to be on the receiving end of spaciousness. And
Yeah.
obviously it's a gift to be the one bringing the spaciousness, but just what a gift to show up and not be the one driving the anxious, too late, too little time, not enough, whatever. And that's something that's taken over my life. Like now I get to airports 3 hours before my flight takes off because it's like I don't want to do that. I don't want to be running to the gate last minute all stressed. Like I just go and I find where my gate is and then I walk around a little bit and I like go into a shop that I'm not going to buy anything from and sort of like, just like have space to just,
Airports are like mini resorts now. So,
yeah, right.
oh, if you, and frankly, I can't tell much difference of being logged on and working at an airport lounge versus like my office. Um, I want to talk a little bit about this being an old woman, an
Mm.
older woman.
Please do. Please do.
Okay, so I was telling you about the women's health company that I started, and I've written tons of books. Like now, it's just like 9 books now. the last five under the in the context of this company. One was the invitation to daily intimate self-care. One was body love, like healing stories about the body. One was natural gifts, 9 gifts first aid for mind, body, and spirit that doesn't require any drugs. One was reverence, modern ritual, and then this last one, which came out in April, and I'm really excited about because I published it as an indie, and Kirkus named it the Indie Book of the Month for August for this month in nonfiction. And that was so gratifying because I spent 3 years writing it. And the idea of the book was to look at the sexual, sensual, and reproductive stages of being in a female body from birth to 100 with complete, like, wide open clarity, a spiritual lens, a scientific lens, stories, and all that stuff. One of the drivers for that book was that the archetypes of being a woman were defined as maiden, matron, crone. And maiden is you can have a baby, but you haven't yet. Matron is you've had a baby and you can still have more. And crone is you can no longer have a baby. So it was like this, your entire life archetypes were framed by in relationship to your reproductive capacity, and that it seemed so limited and transactional or objectifying in the way that it viewed the body. And then if you layer on top of that all of the taboos around sex and biological systems and the lack of scientific data on those systems, that women would come into every stage, their first period, their first sex, their first birth, perimenopause, menopause, and elderhood, they would come into all of these stages with no idea of what to expect and be sort of shocked. So I wrote this book that said there are actually 9 physical stages, the last 3 of which are postmenopausal and scientifically defined by different changes in the embodiment, and that they each have psycho-emotional and spiritual developmental tasks associated with them, and that at this time in history, they're utterly different than they've ever been. Like the questions that women are asking themselves about whether to have a child or not, with whom, using what technologies, have never been asked in human history or before. The questions women in their 60s and 70s are asking about staying vital until 90 with all of the technologies and things that are available to them have never been asked before. And so I'm exploring this question of what it means to have 30 or 40 years past your reproductive capacity and stay vital, stay engaged, not fall apart physically, not give up emotionally because the culture doesn't value you. And what I'm finding is an incredibly inspirational last third act that many people are in that is nothing like elderhood has ever been described in prior literature. The lived experience of people right now is so exciting. So that's something else I want to leave people with, is just thinking about, like, what are the internalized narratives about aging as a woman, that what, your usefulness, visibility, all of the things that come with that, and to decolonize those architectures inside of the self so that you can be more and more free and creative and potent throughout your whole life in a body. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. I feel like if you're running a political campaign, I'm voting for you. Um, I bought multiple copies of your book. You had it at the event in Asheville. I've given it to different women in my life, and I'm in some ways like praying. I'm praying for this impact that women can feel that life. We have in our culture, we have I've talked a lot with people about post parenting life. It's like actually at some point if you have 30-year-old kids, like, yeah, sure, you're a parent, but you're not really a parent anymore in the way that you were when you had 4-year-olds. It's just a different dynamic. So what's life about? And it feels so sad that our culture doesn't have this third chapter or third section of the book you're speaking about, these last 3 phases. So I want to create space, even more space for you to talk about what's possible for women in the third trimester of life.
Yeah. Well, the transition of what was once called the empty nest, someone told me once that, birds don't have an empty nest, actually. When the babies leave the nest, so do they. Like the nest gets abandoned. They don't stay there by themselves going like, where are the babies? you know, and that you're actually like in a beautiful position to say, who have I become? You probably have a little bit more self-awareness. You probably have a little bit more stability financially at this point, and that a lot of the dreams that you might have had or your core essence has probably stayed with you, but morphed. Your skill development has gone into a lot of other things. Your resources have gone into a lot of other things, raising these other beings. And that you have this sort of window that should be approached, that could be approached with curiosity and joy and reverence. So like, what am I about now? What do I dream of now? What does the world need now? Without any pathos or regret or the sense that you're not the person you used to be. That you remember the like Glory Days, that song, Glory Days. I don't like it's not that your glory days are behind you. There wasn't like some reference point. Your glory day is this day. Your glory day is this day in a body. And that to invite an opening that where you can share your wisdom, where you still want to gain new skills, where there are things that you dream of doing, to find your authentic voice and expression, and to know that you do have to put it on a scaffolding of a healthy body and take ultimate responsibility for that, and that there are incredible tools available to you whether that's peptides or minor hormone therapy or pure exercise or touching the ground or ice bathing. Like there's just so many things that are documented to support your lifelong vitality that you have that, set that as the base, and then continue to grow and bloom and open into your next set of possibilities. It's utterly fun. And then all those stories about like, oh, it's all downhill from here are just stories. And if you can find an example of one person who's not doing it the way that, and that downhill narrative, then you know it's possible. So you can copy them. You can find reference points for that. So the book documents a lot of these um, methodologies for keeping the body healthy and alive, but it also documents a lot of the questions and gives stories and examples of people who are living into this more expanded elderhood. Um, yeah, like I have this friend Beatrix, and she just had her first one woman show of all new works at 82 at a museum in Virginia, all new paintings from the last 2 years. Like why not? And they're like the culmination of its mastery of a lifetime of work. So people who have, after the children have come, have left, and they've gone back. And a friend who went back to law school and then became like a food lawyer, like a really super weird niche on food ingredients and purity. Um, and is now the top of the field in that. So just to say that there's no limitation. If you choose to rest and not do anything else, that's also fine, as long as it's done with imbued joy, you know?
Mm.
So some of that. Um, Going back to that tantric worldview, that doesn't end when you're no longer turning heads when you walk into a room. That's an energy. How attractive you are feels to me like an energy. We all know people who don't look the part of a magazine cover, but they walk into a room and you're like, I want to be around that person. Whoosh, what is that? And know that it's a frequency game. It's an energy game. And that if you keep being with clearing your own frequency in your own channel, you will be a magnetic and attractive force your whole life long.
And
Yeah.
how do you do that? How do you stay clear in your frequency and your channel?
I have learned that you do it every day. You're like, okay, what did I pick up in my body today? Um, what did I catch? And like clear it in real time. Like move it. Let's try it. Let's try it. Okay. Well, I already did it for today, so I can't think of anything since it happened. I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. I'm in this women's ceremony, and there's a woman who's like giving me the stink eye. That's how I perceive it, right? Don't know why. Don't know why. But I noticed in my body, like everything that was ever rejected as a child came up in me. Like, why doesn't she like me? Oh, I'm scared. I'm gonna run. So at the end of that day, as I was scanning the day for emotional peaks, highs, lows, things that are stuck in my body, things that need resolution, that moment came up. And I go into like myself and I think of like, when did I have the feeling of being looked at sideways before? Like, how old is that feeling? Um, was my perception accurate? What are some other ways that I could have seen that? And then I just like feel it all and I bless it. I bless it in myself and then I release it in her and I move on. Like I like clear it out of my system by relaxing into it, feeling it and shaking it off and shaking off the story and noticing that things that hit me weird, like in a trigger, are things that are resonating off of earlier experiences that haven't been processed. But trying to keep that like a daily clearing, or a real-time clearing, even better, like do it in the moment. When we do group and someone shares something big and impactful, we don't just go to the next person, right? I'm sure you do this in your groups too. Like you go, wow, you put your hand on your heart, you take a big breath. You might even do like a physical shaking or like an energetic shaking, like a dog would shake their water off. You might like brush it off the front of the body, the arms, the back, and like move it through the system before you open yourself up to hear something next so it doesn't pile on. If somebody like cuts me off in traffic, I'll shake it off. Um, those are examples. Are those too minor?
Oh, those are perfect. They're beautiful. Yeah. I like this. I mean, it's such a it's like a energetic hygiene. It's
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like taking a shower and brushing your teeth every day. It's just part of the practice for the to keep up for the energy body.
Yeah. And if I lose my temper or I get pissed off, then I find that energetically harder to clear
Mm.
because I'm aware of my potential negative impact on someone else. And that feels so bad in my body. So I'll do my own clearing, but then I will take the accountability to do outreach to the other person. Like, I noticed I raised my voice or I was short with you, or I didn't leave that conversation very graciously. I'm sorry for any impact it had on you, because it's not just what others do to me. It's like I want to be a force for coherence.
Mm.
And that means I have to take accountability for when I'm out of integrity in that way. So that's also a thing. That also allows me to not have to be perfect because there's spaciousness to clear the field. Rupture and repair, rupture and repair, rupture and repair. The skill of the age.
Yeah. And the
And
responsibility piece. You mentioned responsibility earlier when we were talking about the civilizational impact of the feminine gifts and wisdom, and I hear that in what you're sharing now.
yeah, it's hard. Nope. That's not right. If I grow up in a world where being wrong isn't means I'm an existential threat. You're wrong, you get beaten down, you get smacked, you get an F, you get failed, you get excluded. Then it's very hard to be wrong. And we can develop a defensiveness in our inner architecture that like doesn't allow anybody to criticize us. We can't even look at our own selves and say, you didn't do very well on that. Like you could do better. You can do better. So this no make wrong, this no blame, no shame movement allows me to look at myself and be honest about where I could have done better. I don't have to make the other person like blame the other person. Like I was loud and obnoxious because you did blank. No, I was loud and obnoxious because I was loud and obnoxious, and yeah, that's part of the responsibility question, but it's more part of the no make wrong movement.
Mm.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about joy. You've mentioned joy a couple of times in these last minutes, and I feel like that's something I get from you as such a deep part of your teaching is cultivating joy and joy as an intelligence and as a compass and as something that I'm knocking my computer over here. Um, as a compass and as a movement that has its own intelligence, orientation, and guides us. So I'm also curious on the other side, not just how do you keep your channel clear, but how do you relate with joy?
Well, my inner persona is a 12-year-old boy. So everything's delightful.
Uh-huh.
Everything's cool, you know. Uh, I don't know, like music, um, like really being in the wonder of how things are made. This like this posture of wonder. Like if you look around you, everything is miraculous. Like how did this get here? And and so I think that's one thing is like taking into account the miraculousness of almost anything showing up in your field. I think if you pay attention to science and nature, you can't help but stay in wonder, like at the little surprises that are there every day. Um, Genuinely being happy when other people are happy and have success. I'll tell you one little story. I was in Los Angeles. I was on Venice Beach, sitting on a bench, kind of like enjoying the sunset. And this girl comes by. Maybe she's like 18, 19, and she's on roller skates. And she's wearing spangled glitter shorts, knee pads, like a little bikini top, headphones, and big sunglasses, giant. And she's just like, grooving. And I'm watching her, and my whole body gets happy. Like just to see her full expression and enjoyment of her body in this light and her movement and I could feel her in my system. And to be like in the frequency of that when you see it in others. So people say, like, if there's something like, say, like you get jealous of somebody, like you get jealous of their like somebody who's in a really happy marriage or somebody who's in a really great condition or athletic condition or who's like shining in their career or whatever, instead of being jealous of them, like enter into their frequency, like and be in utter support, praise, and celebration of them because that draws more of that into your world, into your sphere. If you're jealous and combative of that, it actually pushes it away from you. So, one of the purest paths to joy is to be in celebration of others who are hitting, like who are getting their dream, or in the frequency of success or happiness or whatever. Those are some examples. I also think I mentioned to you that I had an NDE in 2017, and um, that was a very big switch, joy switch.
Yeah, tell us more.
Like before then, I would say I was a little reluctant about being alive in a body, like not fully wanting to be here, like I hadn't fully really chosen. And then I had this experience uh, where it was a little surgical accident and they nicked an artery in my right here uh, and sealed it up. It was an outpatient thing, and the blood leaked into my whole neck and strangled me from the inside. So compressed the trachea. And I called the doctor. I said, I'm really having trouble breathing. And she's like, get to ER. And I got in an Uber. And when I arrived in the ER, I was dead on arrival. And I was above my body as they like threw me onto a gurney and sliced my neck open and the blood went everywhere. And I'm like floating above going, wow, that looks really messy, like floating outside my body. And I stayed out for a few days. And in that space, this like white space of being held close to the body, not like going fully down in the tunnel, like being held close to the body, feeling all these energies, loving energies, my father's energy, but not like him in a body. And like kind of like in the most beautiful, peaceful, spacious, loving, oh my God, so gorgeous and so undifferentiated. And then I had this thought like occur to me, but I love life so much. And boom, I was back in my body. And I opened my eyes, and all my kids are around the bed, and my lover's there, and they're like, you know, like you can't check out without permission. And my son said, the first thing you said is, but I love life so much. And then it was like literally a process of choosing to be here. And what I've noticed since then is that things are in much higher relief and much more precious. And like I take things less seriously and at the same time more seriously. Like it's not serious, but it's also important, and so incredibly beautiful. And we get to have this one embodied experience that will never be repeated to see and touch and be in the world in the only way that we can. And it is every day shockingly gorgeous. There are so many acts of kindness, so many places where creativity and joy like show up, so many places where nature is ingenious. And like it's overwhelmingly beautiful. So I think there's this appreciation and gratitude for how short it is and how lucky we are to have it for this short time. Yeah.
I'm gonna do the thing you were talking about when facilitating. Take a big breath and yeah.
You're up, man. Tell me that story.
So beautiful.
It is really beautiful. Yeah. So the other thing that I notice is what comes to mind are the people who stay with you or you stay with them, and you get to do this 20, 30, 40-year witnessing, you know, and see how everyone who like people grow, and how beautiful it is to watch your friends grow through all these cycles and integrate their experiences and create the narrative of their life. And what a privilege is it to witness each other.
Hmm.
It's another big source of joy. All right. We've
Yeah.
been talking a long time.
We
People,
have.
what are
I
you
feel
guys
like
doing out there? Are you still with us? Are you hanging out with us?
yeah. Yeah, I feel so there's just such a sweet moment happening for me. I feel so met in so many ways, Christine, like by you on all levels and also in what you just shared. I mean, I haven't had a near death experience, but I've had many out of body experiences, many, and it
Mhm.
just fundamentally changes relationship with life. I mean, I feel being with you, I feel an immediacy that's not from scarcity. It's just from presence. And
Mm.
I feel that. And I mean, it's not like I wish near death experiences for more people, but I do wish that feeling of what it's like to really be alive. And I feel that being with you. I just feel so much genuine aliveness and enthusiasm and just zest for being. And I appreciate it. And I just want to thank you for being who you are. Thank you for sharing what you shared and for being a guest and
Yeah, I mean, I love talking to you. I love the stuff you're writing also. And it's coming out of like the idea that you can hold a frequency for the future at a time when it doesn't really seem like there's a short path there. I love how you're doing that. And the way you're pulling people into an awareness of the oneness, and to live from that. It's very beautiful.
thank you. Thank you.
So I'm doing my class I do twice a year. Come if you want to study. It starts again. I don't know when this is airing, but September 16th. I do I do have retreats at the place in Hawaii, which are partly me, but a lot of times it's other facilitators. And I got like people that are doing colonics and IV therapy and all that stuff. So you can come out all detoxed as well as feeling refreshed spiritually. And the book is called Nine Lives of Woman: Sensual, Sexual, and Reproductive Stages from Birth to 100. So if you want to engage more deeply, those are some ways to do it.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll link your website, christinemariemason.com, and I'll link our podcast episode that we did on your show, and I'll link your book. And if there's any other links you want me to put in the show notes, just send them to me. I'll add them.
Super. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for to our listeners. Appreciate you all. And yeah, enjoy.